Mr. President, I rise to present an amendment to this bill. My amendment is simple, and it reflects the kind of common sense budgeting we ought to be doing here in Washington. Today, I offer the penny plan for infrastructure. This plan cuts 1 penny, 1% of all spending, and puts that money in a fund for infrastructure. My amendment would put about $12 billion per year into a fund to fix our roads and bridges. Every agency would still get 99% of the spending they got the previous year. Sure, they would need to trim some fat, but they would still be fine. A lot of businesses and organizations will tell you that they have to cut much greater than 1% in a year. I visited a business recently that in the downturn of 2008, 2009 had to cut 30% of their expenditures. So businessmen and women in America are used to having to cut expenditures. Government never does. Whether it's our highways or our bridges or our waterways, our infrastructure in America is falling behind. Everyone knows it, but like so many things, Washington can't figure out how to fix it, how to find the money to fix it. Politicians on both sides of the aisle talk about trillion-dollar infrastructure plans, but offer no way to pay for it. My plan is much more modest, doesn't increase taxes, and doesn't increase our debt. The penny plan for infrastructure pays for this with money we've already allocated. And to be clear, we do have the money. Washington just spends it in inappropriate ways. Washington spends it, for example, $233 million on a single highway in Afghanistan. So we have money to pave roads in Afghanistan, but they won't vote to spend the money here to pave roads. The people in Afghanistan got $233 million for a road, but then they couldn't even maintain it, so we gave them another $22 million to maintain their road. We spent $326 million to pave 2,000 kilometers of dirt roads in Afghanistan. So we've got enough money to spend over $300 million to pave dirt roads in Afghanistan, but we can't come up with $1 billion to help our infrastructure here. Even this 2,000 kilometers of dirt roads that they went after, they were supposed to pave 2,000 kilometers. It turned out they only paved 159 kilometers. They paved less than 10% of what they actually promised to do with the money. What's that equal to? $2.7 million per mile. It's outrageous, and it goes on year after year after year. I think it's time we try a new way. Just in Afghanistan, we have spent more than the Marshall Plan did to rebuild Europe after the devastation of World War II. And we're still there, spending good money after bad. So when people come up here and say that 1% cut would somehow be a disaster, we need to remind them that the money is there. They just have to listen to the people and pull the plug on this kind of crazy spending overseas. My amendment would move 1% of current spending, and it would put that 1% of the current spending bill into infrastructure. Supposedly, Republicans and Democrats and independents all agree on infrastructure, and yet we don't allocate more money to it because we're too busy paving roads in Afghanistan. If we did this, it'd be about $12 billion. It's not enough to fix everything in the country. It's a modest sum. This is actually a modest proposal to move over a few $billion. But you know what it would do? $12 billion would pave up to 6,200 miles of new 4-lane highway, resurface 20,000 miles of 4-lane highway, 2,200 miles of 6-lane interstate. It would pay for multiple big-ticket infrastructure projects that are currently stuck without funding. In my state, they've been advocating money for the Brent Spence Bridge across the Ohio River since before I was elected. 8 or 9 years of advocating for a bridge that we can't find the money. We've got the money. Quit paving roads in Afghanistan and let's start building bridges and paving roads here. This amendment would improve our infrastructure, benefit our communities, eliminate government waste, and help our economy. So by cutting 1% of the current spending, we'll force all of government to do a better job. There's at least 1% waste. There's probably 10% waste in government, but I'm asking to cut 1% waste, Take that money you cut by making government more efficient and put it into infrastructure. So, Mr. President, I encourage the Senate to consider this amendment, and I think that we have very few amendments come forward where people have a chance to vote for infrastructure. So at this point, I move to concur in the House amendment